Hello again. The idea that the planet is heating up and that this is both an unmitigated disaster and also caused solely by human activity is so widespread now that even asking questions about it can be hazardous. One is likely to be accused of being either a stooge for the oil industry or a dangerous lunatic. However, I'm always curious when I'm told that some idea or other is now settled and cannot be questioned. Often this means there's something fishy going on and that the evidence for the belief is weak. I have no fixed views about climate change, but I cannot help notice that some very dubious assertions are made by those in favour of the idea. It makes me wonder why, if the thing is all open and above board, it should be necessary to engage in deceit. Let me give one or two examples of what I'm talking about. The thumbnail to this video shows a familiar image of coral in Australia's Great Barrier Reef. It looks terrible, doesn't it? It doesn't look at all healthy. I mean, let's face it, coral should be all colourful, shouldn't it? This it looks as though it's a bunch of dead bones. Actually, this is a bleaching event, which does make the coral look like a lot of bleached bones. Because we see the similarities to the white of a skeleton in such pictures, we pick up the subliminal message that the coral reef is dying because of global warming, of course. In the description to this video, I give a link to a BBC News story from March, which is only 5 months ago, in which we are told that something terrible is happening to the Great Barrier Reef. Let me read the first few lines to you. Australia's Great Barrier Reef is being devastated by another mass bleaching event, officials have confirmed. It is the fourth time in 6 years that such severe and widespread damage caused by warm sea temperatures has been detected. Only two mass bleaching events have ever been recorded until 2016. Scientists say urgent action on climate change is needed if the world's largest reef system is to survive. Devastated, severe and widespread damage, warm sea temperatures. It ticks all the boxes, doesn't it? To show us how nature is suffering dreadfully from man-made climate change. Terrible. I also give a link to a more recent news item which was not publicised nearly as widely as the supposed death of all that coral on the Great Barrier Reef in the spring. This one is from a couple of days ago, and it tells us that there is more coral now on the Great Barrier Reef than there was when monitoring of it began almost 40 years ago. In short, it has never been thriving so well. Strange, no? Maybe it's not dying after all. The image of the bleached coral is one of those iconic symbols like the polar bear trapped on an iceberg floating out to sea, which sticks in our memory and sums up what we think is happening. The death of the Great Barrier Reef, the loss of the Arctic ice. Yes, about that. We're all persuaded that the ice in the Arctic is shrinking dramatically and that there will soon be none left and all the polar bears will be gone. Of course, the truth is there are twice as many polar bears now as there were in the 1970s. The population is flourishing as never before. I give a link to an article about this. What about the Arctic ice, though? Surely that's shrinking. Well, that's hard to say. We've only been measuring the extent of the ice there since 1979, which in geological terms is a blink of an eye. I give a link to the measurements of this year's ice cover in the Arctic, and it does seem that at its winter maximum, it was the 10th smallest area recorded since 1979. In other words, the picture is not of the ice shrinking ever more year by year, but rather that some years there is more than others. Many years have seen more ice than this year's maximum, and 10 years have seen less. The climate change story is a lot more complicated than we are led to believe, And yet anybody who tries to talk about it objectively is shouted down and accused of ignoring the science. There really is no such thing as science which is settled, something which is often said about global warming. The very fact that we are told that this is the case for this one thing of all scientific things in the world makes me mightily suspicious.